Hey, are you a coach, consultant, or service business owner who is fed up of wasting time and money chasing after every shiny new object? Are you ready to learn what really works when it comes to attracting a flow of the right clients into your business? What if this summer you could strengthen your business and get ahead of the competition in just minutes a day? Head over to melittacampbell.com/SBC to join me for Summer Business School, a new 6-week online program that will guide you in elevating your plans so you can make your dream business and future a reality, becoming known for the results that you get for your clients, stabilizing your income while actually working less, and developing the mindset for lasting results. I've mapped out all the steps for you and broken everything down so you can get real results in just minutes a day. Get all the details at melittacampbell.com/SBC, but don't wait, there are only a handful of places left. So, hi Pragati, it's great to have you with us on the show today.
Thank you so much, Melitta. It's my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity for having me on the show today.
Yeah, well, I was really interested to speak with you because everyone that we've spoken to so far are really full-time in their business. Even if they're running their business part-time around other commitments, they're not running it as, I hate this word, but a side hustle. So, which is exactly what you've created. So I was really interested to get you on the show because I know there must be so many people in the audience who are in that same situation or are thinking about, well, I want to start a business, but I don't want to go all in just yet. I want to run it alongside of my career or my job while I'll build that up, get the skills and so on. And it makes sense to do it that way so that you have the money coming in and build your business on the side. And then you can make that switch at the time when it makes sense and you can sustain yourself. But before we dive into your advice for running a successful side business, I'd love it if you could share with the audience a little bit about you and your story and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would be very happy to talk about the whole side hustle thing. I know you hate the word, but yeah. My name is Pragati. I'm the founder of My Swiss Story. I also work in tech. I worked in tech for the last 18 years. So I drive digital transformations. I'm working one of the best consulting organizations in the world. So that's like my main job. That's what I do. And then I always needed a creative outlet because the corporate world does not give you enough creative avenues. And that's how my Swiss story happened. It also happened when me and my family, back in 2016, we had moved to Switzerland. And for the first time, I had some time on my hands and I could think about these things because I was always writing. But then I was like, hey, I want to do this more seriously. And that's how the blog happened. And I was also doing my master's at that time when we moved to Switzerland. And it's just a whole new experience. I mean, I come from such a different culture. I come from India, and all my life I've lived in India. And 7 years ago, when we moved to Switzerland, it was such a big like shift in life. I mean, life completely, it was like a reset button that had been pressed on our lives. And we had not even realized it till we actually made the move and we were here in Switzerland. So the first year, of course, everyone thinks that it's really amazing that, hey, you guys made this move, but it wasn't the rosiest of pictures because the first year was like the biggest challenge that we had. And that's when I was like, hey, this experience is so different, but so I have a lot of fodder. Like I have so much to talk about, so much to write about. And that's how I launched. I got a tiny little space on my sister's blog. She had a very successful blog. So I had a really good launch pad. So I got a small section on her blog, and the category was the Swiss blog. And I would just write my stories there. And I launched my Instagram account, 0 followers, 0 posts, like absolutely right from the beginning. And people started to resonate with the content I was creating. There was one portion that was maybe in a similar situation like me, so fellow expats. But there was another audience, which was the aspirational expat. That was really, really connecting with me, that what does it really look like when someone transitions between countries? So Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even planned. It just kept happening and the blog kept growing. So it started just like, a normal blog with not even a proper website. To today, I'm proud that, we have a big audience now and there's a lot of people that connect with my story, and we've built enough resources, we've built enough content that people can consume. And they say that this is something that's really very useful for someone who's really new in Switzerland.
I love that story. And when I moved from the UK to Switzerland, that was a big culture shock. I was living in London at the time. I'm originally from Wales. And moving to Geneva, it felt to me like taking a big step back into the 70s or something. And I was working with the same company. So the company culture was kind of similar. And I hadn't really expected it to be as big a shift as it was, because I was already European. I was already working for the same company. Everybody kind of looks the same when diversity
Yeah.
here and in the UK is very similar. So yeah, I hadn't really expected it to be such a shift, but it did take a few years to get around that. And the working culture is so completely different.
Yes.
So I can imagine coming from India, which is a very unique culture and very different to the European culture. It must have been a huge shock. So,
but even despite that, I had the same feeling that you did sitting in London, because I was always working in global organizations. So we had these matrix organizations where one boss of mine would be in Europe, one would be in the US, and then I would have a local counselor or a project manager. And it was like, hey, I've always worked in global settings. How can it be so different? But when you come here, that's when you realize that it's just so different. It's one thing to work and be on calls with people from all over the world, but it's another thing when you're in the room and when you have transitioned into a different culture completely.
yeah. And it's how wonderful to find an outlet where you can share that experience with others and help them with that same journey, so they don't feel so alone or lost. They have that information to support them. So congratulations on starting that.
Thank you so much.
And that was something you started 7 years ago. And at the time, it kind of made me giggle. You say, "Oh, I had some time on my hands." It's like, knowing you a little bit, I can't imagine you ever have time on your hands. You're such a busy person. You're working full time. You have a family. You're running your blog. You still find time to create events to bring people together. You always have so much on your plate. How have you managed to keep that blog going and be consistent over that time?
Well, the simple answer to that is that I just absolutely love it. It comes really from the bottom of my heart that I just love. And the thing that I knew before I started this blog was that I just really loved writing. I just didn't know how I was ever going to do something about it. I had like a private blog with 4 audience members, which was my husband, my dad, my mom, my sister. That was my audience at that point in time. But it really, I mean, the only thing that keeps me going still is that I absolutely love. Every time I write for my Swiss story, or every time I take a picture and then put the story behind it, the microblogging format, like they say right now, I absolutely love doing it. So it comes from a place of pure passion. And the other thing that happened to me much later was the impact that it was creating. Every time someone would stop me and say, "Hey, I read your article and really resonated with it," or someone would drop me a DM, or someone would, just send me a kind message. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm doing something right. And that, that kind of motivates you to keep going. So I think these two things still stay. Nothing else, even if the other parts go away, these two things will still stay with me. And that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, I think that's really key. As you say, well, we do two things in life. We do what we love and we do what we're being watched on. And that's the big challenge for entrepreneurs. We're not being watched on anything. So we have to do things that we love and are passionate about. And you mentioned right at the beginning that writing was something that you love, and it's something completely different from what you do at work. So it's almost like your space for yourself.
Yeah.
Kind of venturing into self-care in a way. And I read a book by Dr. Nick Hall many years ago. And one thing he says is that there's actually no such thing as too much stress. stress can be really good for us. It forms our character. It shows us what we're really capable of. The problem comes in when we don't have enough counter stress. And counter stress comes from doing an activity that's completely different to the activity before. So it sounds like this is almost your counter stress as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. And what a lovely way to put it, because and when you talk about self-care, it was like a light that went on. That's absolutely what it is. For me, when I just sit and write and I'm alone and then I'm not on the usual calls or, typing out emails or solving conflicts at work, this is really just my space, like you said it. So yeah, it's my way of just tending to myself. So yeah, that's kind of a big driver for this all to work.
So we've mentioned that you love what you do and you're very passionate about it, and that's helped you to be consistent. But I wonder, for anyone else that's listening, is there any advice you have around how to carve out that space? Because very often there's something we really want to do and we're passionate about it, but we don't create the boundary and space to do it, and therefore it never gets done, or we do it very sporadically but not consistently. Is there anything you've done or any strategies that you've put in place or over time perhaps that have really helped you to maintain that consistency?
I mean, and this is the whole thing, right? A lot of people really want to do a lot of things, but you never get to do it because your plan is always in the future. When I have more time on my hand, I'm going to start this. When I reach XYZ, I'm going to launch this particular thing. But that right time or the perfect moment, what I've realized is never comes. And this is exactly my strategy, even when I create content. Sometimes I know that I could probably have done better with, say, my piece that I write, or a video that I publish, or any form of content that I create, or an event that I hold. But that's how you learn. You can't keep waiting for the perfect moment. That, I feel, is something that really holds people back. And that's when they lose out on staying consistent, because staying consistent is the most important thing. I mean, that's really the one thing that's worked for me, is that I've really gone on with this 7 years consistently doing what I was good at, and then I kept building on it. But people kind of keep waiting, like, hey, I'm going to do this later, and this is not so good. There's one person that I still know has promised to write an article and has not done it in the last 3 years, because she's like, my article has to be absolutely perfect. And I'm like, come on. So, these are the things that I see that people kind of miss out on. And then it's important for me, like a person, I think I really, really trust my instincts. That's one of the things that, again, has really, really worked for me, is that I put things into action very quickly. And the pitfall for that is that I already have a lot on my plate, like you said. But because I'm so excited about some things, and my instinct says that, yes, we have to do this, I sign up for much more than I can handle at times. I've started to do better on it, because I've actually had serious issues on my health because of that. But yeah, that's also something that my advice would be: don't sign up for too much without knowing what your capacity is. Because there are a lot of people, who are waiting for the right time, but there are also a lot of people who want to do 100 things in the world, and then they forget about themselves in the process. So that's the other spectrum of it. Now I feel like I'm kind of in balance of being on either of the two sides.
Yeah, so much wisdom in what you just said there. And I think, as you say, a lot of it comes from experience, getting things wrong. And that's where we learn the fastest, I think, is just from getting things wrong. And I was speaking with a lady who, she's had her own business for many years. And I was just chatting, it's like, what would be your biggest piece of advice on reflection? And she said, do you know what? I think the biggest piece of advice, and what has helped me be so successful, is aiming for B minus. It feeds into this idea of being too perfect. Most people are aiming for A++, but you'll never get that. You'll be 3 years waiting to create anything, and that's not helping you. You just feel guilty and like a failure every time you don't do these things, and it's not helping your audience because your message isn't getting out there. So aiming for B minus instead, or if you're elsewhere where you don't have that grading system, like 75% or 80%, then you're going to get so much more done, and it's going to be more than good enough to have the impact that you want as well. So I love that message.
Yeah, yeah. And I totally agree with you. And if, for me, there's a new challenge happening almost every day, right? I mean, all this while I was behind the scene, I was sitting at my desk or on my phone and I was typing content out and I was just putting it out in the world. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't work. My latest is now that I started doing events. I call the whole initiative with purpose. And when we do events, uh, there's a lot of public speaking involved now. Now, public speaking is not something that I'm alien to because I've worked in the corporate world for now so many years. So presentations happen every day. I teach. I'm also a lecturer at one of the universities in Switzerland. And then, I stand in front of 60 students. But doing this is it's a totally different ball game to make sure that you hold the audience's attention, that you are holding engaging discussions, you're shining the spotlight on other women. It's absolutely a new thing for me, but I'm still making mistakes, but I'm okay with them. This is a new thing for me, and I'm kind to myself saying that, hey, I am new to this. I am kind of learning with every webinar that I do, and every time I'm standing in front of an audience, I am really getting better and better. So I am putting myself out there, and that's my advice to anybody who's listening today or watching us, is that just put yourself out there. It takes a lot of strength, easier said than done, but that's how we just keep learning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And public speaking isn't something that, as an introvert, was ever my kind of natural space to be in, but it has helped me so much in other aspects of my life, career, business. And it's so wonderful when you have that almost superpower that you can stand up and share something valuable with other people.
Absolutely.
There's nothing quite like it, but it's not easy for anyone, even people who are comfortable with standing up and speaking. As you said, structuring something, keeping people's attention, that's a skill that you have to learn, and you have to learn by just doing it, getting it wrong. And I was a member of Toastmasters for a long time, founded my own group locally to help with that. And it's incredible when you see people come, because it's a safe space where you can speak up and practice and give it a go. And people come at first and they're either extroverted and just talk nonstop. There's no kind of pauses or breaks or anything, or they're really quite shy and nervous, and they don't speak enough or speak up enough, and they're looking at the floor. And you have the kind of two opposites.
Yeah.
But then very quickly, sometimes even after just 2 sessions of speaking, they're in a very different space because they get the feedback and the experience, and they realize, oh yes, now I understand this bit. I can do something differently. So it's a wonderful experience. So I love that idea of putting yourself out there. But you say this, it's not always easy. You definitely need some courage to do these things, especially for the first time. Do you have any tricks around that? Is there anything you do or say to yourself to encourage yourself to kind of go for it?
So this, I really wanted to, develop the skill, and I am now in the background really working on it. So I did work with a coach on this topic. And one of the things that really helped me was what I do before any event or whenever I'm going to speak publicly, I do the whole event in my mind. So what I do is I do the whole, like everything from A to Z. I practice the whole thing again. I mean, I'm someone who practices a lot. That's very normal to me. That comes to me, that I structure, I make my notes, I'll practice again and again. But when you've done this whole thing that you are a little bit nervous about, or actually quite nervous about, one thing completely in your head, it's a different experience when you're doing it for the second time. You're somehow much better. And another thing that I really learned is that think about not yourself, but the audience. The moment you start thinking, because people generally don't want you to fail, because if you are uncomfortable, you're making them uncomfortable as well. It reflects however you're behaving. So when you put that spin on, wearing that hat and understanding, they really are there because they want to hear you. That kind of changes your mindset. I mean, but it's of course still practice. But some of the techniques that I've now started to use are these, the ones that I just said.
Yeah, that mindset shift can be so powerful, can't it? And I used to do leadership communication coaching when I was in corporate, And one thing I kept reminding them, because I was quite taken aback by just how many leaders hate communicating. They're really nervous. They don't like writing. They don't like speaking. They don't like having team meetings. They just want to kind of do a good job behind their computer, but they are a leader, so they have to get out there and speak.
Yes.
But, reminding them that, it's not your message. It's the message that your audience, your team, they need to hear to be able to grow, to be able to do their work the way they want to. You're being selfish, keeping that to yourself. You have to gift it to your audience. So it's not about you at all.
At all.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting when people think of it a little bit differently. Well, what can I gift to my audience today to help them in some way that's going to help?
Yes.
And it can be small things, and you definitely don't need to know all of the answers, because I think that's something people are worried about as well. Sharing something, putting a message out there, but then being questioned on that.
Yeah.
The questions are really interesting because it teaches you what people really need to hear, which is part of the learning process. But also, they're never what you think. And very often when you get these questions, you think, oh, actually, I can answer this. And if you don't have to, you can always come back to them or ask the audience, who else can answer this question? Who has experience in this? And then that brings people into the conversation, which is always a good thing anyway. So yeah, it's all this learning experience, but you don't know this until you do it, until you try. So
until you do it. Yeah, that's the first step. You've got to take that one. And that's the one that you have to put yourself out. I mean, to discover these things, you have to keep doing them. So
yeah. And I like the idea of visualization as well. It's something that a lot of top athletes do. They visualize the entire race before they run it. And studies have shown that their performance improves just from doing that process. So for you, visualizing that whole process, you will improve as a result. And you'll have more confidence as well because you feel prepared, you know what you're stepping into. And another aspect of visualization, which I find quite helpful as well, is to visualize the steps between where you are now and getting to that point. So if you're going to give a talk, you visualize, well, what do I need to do to get there? And visualize the number of rewrites you have to do, visualize the amount of practice, so that in your mind, you're expecting to do that. Like when you're rewriting it again, it doesn't feel like you're failing or getting it wrong because your mind is prepared and it knows this is the process. So it can be such a powerful thing.
You put it so beautifully. Yeah, absolutely. And your confidence goes up and you're more prepared. And it's just a different feeling. I think people should really, really try that.
Yeah. And then when you show up and you speak, you're not really doing it for the first time because you've done it before.
You've done it once. Yeah.
So one thing that struck me from everything you're saying is I get the impression that to keep everything going the way you have with, and you keep like adding in, oh, and I'm a lecturer. Really?
But only during the autumn semesters.
Okay, only.
Only.
I get the impression that one thing that's perhaps helped you, but I could be completely wrong, is really focusing in on what you love doing and what's most important. You're not allowing yourself to get bogged down in all the little faffy bits and pieces that we could allow ourselves to get caught up in or distracted with social media or making things looking pretty on Canva or whatever. You're just really, this is what I need to do, and just get in there and do it and focus on those important points. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say. I mean, yes, I do stay a lot in the moment, which really helps me. Sometimes I have so much on my plate that if I start to put it down on the paper, like I kind of start making a to-do list, or if I start visualizing what all I need to complete, and it's just one day that I'm talking about. If there are certain days like that, of course, not every day is the same. But if I really start doing that to myself, I will overwhelm myself and probably not be able to achieve anything. So I try as much as possible to stay in the moment, and I go into my execution mode. Have to have that flow, but I'm a very driven person when I'm in the moment. This is what I need to do. I can prioritize, and this is how I'm going to do it. My entire 2020, when we went into the lockdown, was, I think, the most successful year of my life, because I realized I could, that's when I had started lecturing. That's when I got my promotion at Accenture. That's when My Swiss Story launched our first book. So we wrote this travel book, which was super successful. So I was doing a lot of new things, but I was very happy doing all of them. Of course, that's one of the things, like you do really need to enjoy it. But I was not allowing myself to get overwhelmed with how much I had signed up for, but rather I was really taking it one day at a time. And that really helped me. Of course, like I said before, when you sign up for too much, it could have other impacts on your health, on your well-being, on your family, how you balance your life. So I did realize that as an aftermath of that year. But then I knew how I needed to ask for help. I made sure that I, started delegating much more. So there are a lot of lessons also that come from when you do a lot. Then there are also, when you get the time to reflect, there are a lot of lessons that you get out of it, and you live your life much better because you've gone through that experience to know where you need to really enable things for yourself. What is it that can be automated? What is it that can be delegated? What are the things that you need to demand from your family now because you are in this phase of life? And how do you really want to take care of your mental health, your physical health? How are you going to prioritize your life? So I think 2021 was all about that. Probably did not have enough milestones on the paper, but that was what I was doing. And then that's the year then you're more proud of, because then you put that balance in your life.
Yeah, it's so important. So you have a plan, and then you can execute that in the moment. You don't have to think, oh, what do I do now?
Yeah,
All the time.
yeah.
And
And
allow.
I plan a lot, by the way. I plan a lot. It's not that I don't plan. The problem with working so much is that you never do stop working. So you've got to love what you do. But of course, there has to be a lot of planning that you do. You have to give yourself enough time to reflect. You have to give yourself enough time to just chill and enjoy life, which I find very hard. I do not know how to relax. That's work in progress.
Yeah.
Authentically saying that.
Yeah, I think coming back to a phrase you used earlier, it's so important to be kind to yourself, because we are still figuring these things out. Of all of the women I've interviewed on this show, some of whom have been running their business for many years, they are earning millions, but they are still figuring things out. There's still places they want to go. And a lot of the time it is this balance that we are so driven, we are so passionate about the work that we're doing and the other projects around that taking that time off for ourselves isn't so easy, because it's a different way of thinking. It's not all go, go, go. It's more stop, stop, stop. And it just feels wrong. Sometimes it doesn't vibrate with everything else that you're doing, but it is such an important lesson to learn.
And all of this is new, right? It's not new to us. We did not grow up like this. I mean, at least in my culture and the way I was growing up, it was all about, being really good at your academics and then being really good at other things. And that's how I grew up. I mean, this whole thing, I think my mother will not even understand what being kind to yourself is. So I think at least we are new to these concepts. At least I'm very new to these concepts of self-love, self-care, being kind to yourself. And now, of course, they are not fads. I mean, I understand how important they are because firsthand experiences with not being able to prioritize just yourself at times. So yeah, but it's also the way we grew up. It was different.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely, my mother and grandmother were in the space of just giving to everybody else, and that's your duty. It's what's expected and what society expects. It was so important. I think things have changed a lot, but one thing that I keep in mind when it comes to switching off is that I am now creating a model for my kids. So I have 2 daughters, and they have so much stimulation. They have social media, they have their phones, they're calling their friends in the middle of the night because they have their phones in their rooms. And so I have to set the example. If I'm on my phone the whole time, that they're not learning anything different. So in those moments where I think I can't switch off because I've got this to do and I should be promoting my podcast more, and I haven't told anyone about my book recently, and I've got so many things I want to be doing, but no, because if I do this, it's going to be worse for them because they don't ever switch off. So I have to set that example. So that's one thing that I'm telling myself that's helping. Anyone in the audience, do share with us any strategies that are working for you. But it's you mentioned this idea of kindfulness. So we are learning and growing, and we must remember to be kindful, and that taking time for ourselves isn't selfish, it's being selfful.
Yes.
Only then, when we have that time and energy and the focus, that we can give the best of ourselves to other people. So we have to put ourselves first in that, no matter how wrong that feels. But once you start doing it, you realize, yeah, this makes so much more sense now. I'm in alignment, I have that energy, I can really give to other people.
Absolutely. You're a better mother, you're a better wife, you're a good manager, you're a good teacher. There's so many things that you're doing that if you're taking care of yourself, you can almost see the results instantaneously, that you see yourself doing so much better. And I, just like you, I have one, and she's almost a teen now. She's 12 and a half. And yeah, I mean, the device regulation, we do that a lot. But one of the things that I tell her is, I really want you to have a lot of fun, because that's not what we were told when we were growing up. For me and my sister, it was almost like, focus on these things right now. You have all the time in the world to have fun later. That later never comes.
Yeah.
So the later never comes, and you're conditioned so differently now that you kind of are in that hustle mode, even if sometimes you want to kind of just step back, and that's against your natural self. So that's why I tell my daughter Niyati that, hey, I really want you to have fun. This is like one of the goals that I have for you. And then, yeah.
I love that. And that's why I don't like that word hustle, is because it almost sets the expectation that you should be working hard,
Yes.
and cramming your business in any nooks and crannies. But as we've said, you can't do that. You have to find that space and learn to have more time for yourself as well.
Absolutely.
Pragati, you've been running your blog for 7 years. You started monetizing that a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you've learned from making that switch that you wish you knew earlier?
A lot, to be honest. I had no idea. And it's not easy, right? I mean, it's a digital platform. It was always a non-profit platform where people, had the opportunity to take resources and, run with it. So I wish I had more clarity of just what is it that's going to be monetized. I mean, I had to experiment with so many things to see what's the impact or what's the value that I can give the audience that I have cultivated. So I wish I knew that. I wish I worked really hard on that, because I was following my instinct, which I love. In any case, I love doing that, but I never really had a plan of how to turn a non-profit platform into a proper business eventually. So that's still work in progress. That's still coming. But I think cultivating the audience was a really strong step that I had taken, not even realizing that I was really working towards making this into a successful business.
Yeah.
So,
I think once you have that clear audience, as you say, then you can start to think, well, this is what they're taking away from the blog right now. Yeah. What can I add in to create more value for them that they're going to be willing to pay for? And you've built up the quality, that trust in your brand. It has to be something that's going to align with that. You don't want to just suddenly destroy your brand by just...
Absolutely. How do you really, tap the right audience? I mean, so I have 10,000 or whatever number of followers that I have. That's an audience that has happened because they like maybe pretty pictures, or they're reading some of the content that I produce. They are not the ones who are going to become my future clients. So there's a lot of kind of, these basic things that you need to understand. Pricing is such an important topic that you need to understand. And, we were just talking about before the podcast started, how mailing lists are the second level of, building your funnel. So there's a lot. I mean, I wish I knew these things before, but I'm learning them now along with building this as a business.
Yeah, it's all a process, but I think, as you experiment and you learn alongside your audience and you start to see what works, I think coming back again to this idea of being kindful, you will get there. You'll stay in the game. If you start doing these things and saying to yourself, oh, I'm so stupid, I should have done this earlier, or I should have known this, or whatever, then you're not going to get very far. So it's not very helpful. So it sounds like, although in retrospect, perhaps you could have started some of these experiments earlier, been more specific with the audience. A lot of this stuff we only learn through experience, and every situation is different. Every business, every brand, every blog, there is no perfect formula for anybody because there are so many different factors in that. So I think the mindset and the approach you have is going to really see you through. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next with My Swiss Story as you take it to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, I think our next level has already started this year on a really good note, because I started working on the whole community building exercise. What I told my audience at the beginning of this year is that, guys, I have also changed. I cannot keep talking about the same expat resources. We've built so much of it. Now there's so much on the blog. There's so much on my gram. There's a lot on Facebook, and we do a lot of newsletters. But I have evolved as well. In the last 7 years as a person, I have changed as well. And that's when the community building exercises started, where, hey, how can we add more value to our typical audience members? So we started bringing people together physically, virtually. And I wanted to really connect with my audience, not just through comments and through messages, but I wanted to see them. So that's how the whole With Purpose initiative came into being. And we started doing coffee meets, we started doing webinars, proper events, networking formats, which were very different from, hey, the usual apero in Switzerland, where you pick up a glass and then speak with 3-4 people, but having an engaged audience, and then everyone taking back something from the kind of events that My Swiss Story pulls. So it's a new chapter for me, and I'm really looking forward to how this journey is going to now shape up, because My Swiss Story has changed a lot. We can't keep saying, hey, Switzerland is like super beautiful. Everybody knows that. I've said it so many times now. So that is given. We've written a lot of travel content, written travel books, but the next step is really generating impact out of this, out of the whole community thing that's happened.
Yeah. And, it's called My Swiss Story. And if you just keep telling chapter 1 over and over, you're not being true to your brand anyway. Pragati, thank you so much for coming and sharing so openly everything that you've learned from creating this side business. Is there anything that you feel we haven't touched on that might help other people out there who are in your shoes or thinking of starting something on the side?
Yeah, I think I've spoken about most of the things that I had to, but yeah, if I had to really just say one thing, is that don't hold back. If you think, and we all have something that people do want to listen to, we all have something to say. So if you're on the edge, if you're thinking about doing it, just do it. Don't wait for the perfect time. Just go ahead, do it, and then learn during the process of kind of building it, and you'll get there.
Brilliant. Brilliant note to end on. Thank you so much. If people want to know more about you or to connect with you, it's probably a bit obvious maybe, but where's the best place for them to go and find you?
Well, the best place, and I'm glad you asked me this question. Well, the best place is Instagram, because that's the medium that I'm at a lot. Like, I've invested a lot of time on it, and I can be found there. You can send me a message and probably get an answer the earliest.
And is that under your name or My Swiss?
It's under my name. It's under my name. So Instagram.com/Pragati Siddhanti. I think maybe we'll put it in the somewhere in your.
I'll put it all in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Perfect. So that's the best place to get me.
And your blog is myswissstory.com.
Yeah, it's .com.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.